Hello everyone, and welcome to Whispered Abyss. Relax, settle in, and get ready as we dive into tonight's story. Let the darkness take you, and let's begin. It was Christmas Eve in the small town of Black Hollow, where every year, the town square would transform into a festive wonderland. Lights twinkled on every tree, the scent of hot chocolate and pine filled the air, and families gathered to celebrate the season of joy. But for Mia, this year's celebration felt different. The usual warmth of the holidays had been overshadowed by an uneasy feeling that gnawed at her. Something was wrong. Mia and her younger brother Liam had been eagerly awaiting Christmas Eve since the beginning of December. Their parents, always the picture of holiday cheer, had promised them a magical night at the annual town tree lighting. But this year, there was an air of tension that Mia couldn't shake. People whispered in hushed tones, casting wary glances toward the old church on the hill. The church, abandoned for years, had once been the center of Black Hollow's Christmas traditions, until a mysterious fire claimed its steeple 5 years ago, leaving the building scarred and unusable. Ever since, the town seemed to have lost a little of its holiday spirit. Mia stood with Liam in front of their home, looking up at the massive, glowing Christmas tree. The colorful lights flickered as if they had a life of their own, their hues shifting from bright reds and greens to deep blues and purples. The usual cheer of the holiday felt almost hollow. Even the Christmas carolers, once a common sight, seemed to avoid the tree this year, as if they were afraid to sing in front of the gathering crowd. "You okay?" Liam asked, noticing Mia's troubled expression. Mia forced a smile, brushing aside her unease. "Just tired, that's all. Let's go to the square." They walked through the town, the sounds of laughter and chatter growing louder as they approached the heart of Black Hollow. The town square was beautifully decorated, with towering snowmen and wreaths hanging from every building. But as they drew closer, Mia noticed something strange. The people in the square weren't smiling. Their faces were pale, as if they were all waiting for something. When they reached the edge of the square, Mia's mother called out to them, her voice tinged with worry. "Mia, Liam, come over here. We need to talk." The two children hurried toward their mother, who stood beside their father near the fountain, looking anxious. Mia's father, usually the jolly one, seemed to be scanning the crowd nervously. "What's going on?" Mia asked, glancing around. "Why does everyone look so tense?" Her father exchanged a worried look with her mother before he spoke in a low voice. "There's something strange happening tonight. People are saying the old church is active again." "Active?" Mia repeated, her brow furrowing. "But the church burned down. It's abandoned." "That's what we thought," her father replied. "But there are rumors that something's been seen up there again, at midnight." Mia's heart skipped a beat. The old church had always been a place of dark stories in Black Hollow. Stories about spirits that roamed the town at night, about the fire that consumed the church's steeple, about the disappearance of Father Jonathan, the town priest, just before the fire. The fire that no one ever fully explained. Mia had grown up hearing whispers about the church, but she'd always dismissed them as superstition. But now, with the strange atmosphere around her, she wasn't so sure. "Are we still going to the tree lighting?" Liam asked, his voice full of excitement, unaware of the ominous tone in the air. Her mother sighed. "We'll see, but keep close. There's something not right about tonight." As the final words left her mouth, the sound of the church bell ringing echoed through the air. It was not the usual chime of midnight. It was deeper, more resonant, like something far older. The sound sent a chill down Mia's spine, and she could see that everyone in the square had stopped in their tracks. They all looked toward the hill where the church stood, its silhouette barely visible against the night sky. Mia glanced at her parents. Their faces were filled with dread. Something was coming. Something that had been waiting. Suddenly, the lights on the Christmas tree flickered violently, casting strange shadows across the square. The once bright bulbs seemed to pulse, like they were fighting against an unseen force. Then, one by one, the lights began to go out, plunging the entire town square into darkness. A hushed whisper ran through the crowd. Then, a scream. Mia felt her stomach drop as the darkness around her seemed to deepen. The scream was followed by another, then several more. Her mother grabbed her arm tightly. "Go back to the house," her father commanded, his voice urgent. "Now!" Mia didn't hesitate. She grabbed Liam's hand and bolted toward their house, the sounds of screaming and chaos filling the air behind them. But no matter how fast they ran, it felt like the darkness was closing in on them. And somewhere, from the direction of the church, the eerie toll of the bell rang out once more. Mia's breath came in ragged gasps as she and Liam sprinted through the snow-covered streets. The world around them had become a blur of dark shapes and white, swirling snowflakes. The Christmas lights that had once decorated the town were now nothing but faded remnants, flickering and dimming in the distance. The cold air stung Mia's face, but it was nothing compared to the icy grip of fear that had wrapped around her chest. Behind them, the sounds of screaming and shouting echoed through the streets, but Mia dared not look back. She could feel something watching them, something waiting, just beyond her peripheral vision. Every few steps, a shadow seemed to dart in and out of the darkness. The familiar streets of Black Hollow now felt like a twisted labyrinth, alien, dangerous, and suffocating. "Why are they screaming?" Liam asked, his voice trembling with both excitement and fear. "What's going on?" Mia wanted to reassure him, to tell him it was just a misunderstanding. But the truth was, she had no idea. She didn't understand any of it. All she knew was that something was terribly wrong. They reached the front door of their house, but it was locked. Mia hammered on it with her fists, desperate to get inside, to be safe. The seconds felt like hours as the sound of the church bell tolled again, each chime louder, closer, and more menacing than the last. It was as if the very earth was vibrating with its power. Finally, her father opened the door, his face pale and tense. He grabbed them both by the shoulders, pulling them inside. "Lock the door behind you," he ordered in a strained voice. His eyes darted toward the darkened streets outside, fear etched into his features. Mia didn't need to be told twice. She slammed the door shut and bolted it, her hands shaking as she tried to steady the lock. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows as if trying to force its way in. She glanced toward her mother, who was already pulling out a small wooden box from beneath the kitchen counter. "Mom?" Mia asked, her voice tight with anxiety. "What's going on? What's happening to the town?" Her mother didn't answer right away. Instead, she carefully opened the box, revealing a collection of strange old trinkets, candles, a cross, and several pieces of faded parchment. She began muttering something under her breath, her hands moving swiftly over the items as though preparing for something they had all been avoiding for years. "Mia," her father said, his voice low but urgent. "Go upstairs with Liam. Don't come down unless we say so." Mia opened her mouth to protest, to argue, but a glance at her father's face told her there was no room for discussion. He was scared, terrified even, and she had never seen him like that before. Without a word, Mia grabbed Liam's hand and led him up the stairs to their shared room. The old house creaked and groaned around them, as if it were just as unsettled by the night's events. Mia could still hear the distant tolling of the bell, each strike pulling at her insides like an invisible force. They sat in silence, the weight of the night pressing down on them. Mia's mind raced as she tried to piece together what was happening. The old church, the strange bell tolling, the darkness falling over the square. Was it all connected? Was there some evil force that had been dormant for years, only now to rise again? And if so, what did it want? Why had it chosen tonight? A loud bang at the window snapped Mia from her thoughts. She jumped, her heart leaping in her chest. Liam's eyes were wide with fear, his small hands clutching the edge of the bed as if it could protect him. "It's just the wind," Mia whispered, though she didn't believe it. She slowly approached the window and peered through the frosted glass. There was nothing out there, nothing that she could see, but the feeling, the oppressive weight of something watching them, was still there. It was as though the darkness had grown eyes, and those eyes were fixed on their house. "Mia!" Liam's voice cracked. "What's happening? Why does it feel so wrong?" Mia didn't have an answer for him. She didn't know what was happening, but one thing was clear. Whatever it wasn't just a bad dream. It was real, and it was coming closer. From downstairs, Mia heard the faint sound of her parents arguing, their voices low but intense. The words were muffled, but Mia could hear the panic in their tone. Her mother's voice was especially sharp, filled with a kind of desperation Mia had never heard before. "Do you think it's really back?" her father asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. "I don't know," her mother replied, her voice shaking. "But We have to be prepared." The conversation stopped abruptly, followed by the sound of the front door opening. Mia's heart skipped a beat as she heard a faint shuffle of footsteps in the snow outside. Then, the bell tolled again. This time, it was louder than before. Mia could feel it vibrating in her bones. Suddenly, the lights in their room flickered. The air around her grew colder, and the walls seemed to close in. The dark was alive. And it was coming. The lights flickered again, this time more violently, and the room plunged into darkness. Mia's heart hammered in her chest as she fumbled for the light switch, but her hands were trembling too much to find it. The coldness in the room seemed to grow more intense with each passing second. She could hear her own breath, shallow and quick, as her eyes adjusted to the dark, searching for any sign of movement. Liam's voice broke the silence. "Mia, I'm scared." Mia wanted to comfort him, to tell him everything would be okay. But deep down, she could feel that something was horribly wrong. The whole town seemed to be suffocating under the weight of it, like a shadow slowly consuming everything it touched. She pulled Liam close, wrapping her arms around him as she listened to the sounds downstairs. The voices had stopped, replaced by a strange, eerie stillness. A stillness that felt unnatural. Outside, the wind howled like a wounded animal, its breath scraping against the house. The world beyond the walls felt distant, alien, like it had been swallowed whole by whatever darkness had come to Black Hollow. A soft knock at the door jolted Mia upright. Her pulse quickened. Who could it be? Her parents had already gone downstairs. They wouldn't knock. The door creaked open slowly, revealing a figure standing in the hallway, barely visible in the dark. Mia's breath caught in her throat, her mind racing to process what she was seeing. It was her father. At least, it looked like him. But his features were twisted in a strange, almost unnatural way. His eyes were wide, too wide, and there was something unsettlingly hollow about his expression. "Mia, Liam," he whispered, but his voice was wrong, too slow, too low, like a voice from a dream. Mom?" Liam stuttered, his voice trembling. But the figure in the doorway didn't respond. Instead, it stepped forward, its movements jerky and disjointed. The air grew even colder, if that was even possible. Mia could see her breath fogging in front of her face, but her father's, if that was truly him, seemed to hang unnaturally still, not even a hint of warmth in his body. Mia's pulse raced as she pulled Liam closer, instinctively blocking him from the figure. "Dad!" she called out, but her voice cracked. "What's wrong with you?" The figure didn't answer. Instead, it took another step, its feet dragging across the floor with an unsettling screech. The closer it got, the stronger the coldness in the room became. Mia's skin prickled, her body covered in goosebumps. The door behind them was wide open now, and through it, she could hear the faint sound of the bell tolling once more. It was so close now that it almost sounded like it was coming from inside the house. Suddenly, the figure froze. Its head tilted to the side, a sharp, unnatural angle that sent a shiver crawling up Mia's spine. She could feel its gaze burning into her, even though its eyes were black, devoid of any light. "Mia," the figure whispered again, but it wasn't her father's voice anymore. It was something else, something ancient and cold. "You're not safe." Mia's breath hitched as she grabbed Liam's hand and pulled him away, backing into the corner of the room. Her heart pounded in her chest, and every instinct screamed at her to run, to get out of there. But where would they go? What could they do? The figure in the doorway stepped forward once again, its mouth stretching open wider than seemed possible, revealing rows of sharp teeth, glistening in the dim light. Mia's stomach twisted in horror as she realized it wasn't her father at all. It was something else entirely, something that had taken his form. A scream bubbled up in Mia's throat, but before she could release it, the lights flickered back on. For a moment, everything seemed to return to normal, but the creature in the doorway remained, its twisted grin stretched wider, its eyes still staring into her very soul. "Mia!" Liam cried out, tugging on her arm. "We need to go!" With a sudden burst of adrenaline, Mia grabbed Liam's hand and yanked him toward the window. She didn't know if it was the right thing to do, but it was the only thing that made sense. The door to the hallway was too close to the creature, and the window, though small, was their only chance. Without looking back, she climbed onto the windowsill, pulling Liam with her. "Hold on," she whispered, barely able to breathe as she pushed open the window. Before they could escape, the creature lunged forward, its chilling, unnatural scream filling the room. Mia barely had time to react before she shoved Liam through the window, scrambling after him as the thing's cold fingers brushed against her ankle. The night air hit her like a slap in the face, cold and biting, but she didn't care. She landed heavily in the snow, rolling to her feet as quickly as she could. Liam was already halfway down the street, running for all he was worth. "Mia!" he shouted, his voice filled with panic. "Hurry!" Mia didn't need to be told twice. She stumbled to her feet, her legs weak but fueled by fear. They had to get away from that thing, from whatever was haunting Black Hollow. But the town was changing, warping around them. The streetlights, what few remained, flickered like dying stars, casting long, twisting shadows on the snow. They had no idea where they were going. All they knew was they couldn't stay. The bells tolled again, louder this time, and Mia could hear something else beneath it. Voices, low and garbled, speaking words she couldn't understand. The darkness was closing in, and they were running out of time. Mia and Liam ran through the streets, the sound of their feet crunching in the fresh snow, the only noise in the night. The cold wind whipped against their faces, but it barely registered over the gnawing terror that twisted in their stomachs. Behind them, the house loomed dark and silent, but Mia could still feel it, the presence, that thing that had masqueraded as her father. It was out there, somewhere, hunting them. They didn't look back. Liam stumbled and fell in the snow, and Mia barely managed to catch him, pulling him back to his feet with a strength she didn't know she had. They didn't have time to stop. The night was suffocating, and every shadow seemed to shift and curl like a living thing. "Mia," Liam gasped, his voice shaking. "Where are we going? What was that thing?" "I don't know," Mia replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know, but we have to keep going." They reached the end of their street, but the town's familiar landmarks were missing. The streets that once led to the park, the shops, the school, all were unfamiliar now, darkened and twisted. The houses were wrong, their windows blacked out, their roofs caved in or missing entirely, as if they had never truly existed. Liam's breath came in quick, shallow gasps. He was starting to panic, his small hands clutching Mia's arm as he stumbled alongside her. "Mia, I'm scared. What's happening?" Mia shook her head, her own fear threatening to choke her. She didn't know how to explain it. The town wasn't just abandoned, it felt cursed, like the very air was thick with something malevolent. It wasn't just the lights or the shadows that were wrong. Everything was wrong. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed through the streets, causing Mia to freeze. Her heart skipped a beat. It had come from the direction of their house. A second bang followed, louder this time, accompanied by the sound of shuffling footsteps. She grabbed Liam's hand, dragging him into a nearby alley, hoping to hide from whatever was coming. They crouched down, their breaths coming in erratic bursts as they tried to quiet themselves. Mia strained her ears, listening to the sound of the footsteps growing closer. Her stomach churned. Whatever was out there, it was getting closer, and it was moving with purpose. The bell tolled again, a low, mournful sound that seemed to vibrate in her bones. And then, from the darkened street ahead of them, she saw it. A figure, tall and thin, standing at the end of the alley. It was hard to make out at first, but as it moved closer, Mia's heart dropped into her stomach. It wasn't human. Its limbs were long and spindly, its body unnaturally thin. Its skin, if it could even be called that, was stretched tight over its bones, a sickly pale color that glowed faintly in the darkness. Its head was too large for its body, the eyes empty black pits that seemed to suck in the light around them. Mia felt the air around her grow colder, and she knew this was it. This was the thing that had been hunting them, the thing that had taken over her town. It was closer now, its head tilting slightly as it stared at her with those empty, unblinking eyes. "Run," Mia whispered, barely able to get the words out. She grabbed Liam's arm, but he was frozen in place, his eyes wide with terror. The creature took a step forward, its limbs cracking and snapping like brittle wood. Mia didn't wait. She shoved Liam ahead of her, forcing him to move, and the two of them ran down the alley, the creature's footsteps echoing behind them. But no matter how fast they ran, it was always there, just a few steps behind. Every time they turned a corner, it was waiting for them, its inhumanly long fingers brushing the walls as it followed. It was as though the very town itself was bending to its will, guiding them deeper into its dark heart. They reached the town square, but it was no sanctuary. The large Christmas tree in the center was dead, its lights flickering faintly in the wind. The snow around it was stained dark, as if the ground itself was bleeding. The bell tower in the distance rang again, its sound now unbearably loud, like a shrieking wail. The creature was no longer behind them. Mia's head snapped around, searching for it, but there was no sign of it. For a moment, the world stood still, and then the ground trembled. The town square cracked open, splitting the earth beneath their feet. Mia grabbed Liam, pulling him away from the chasm that had opened up in the ground. The bell rang one final time, and Mia felt a pull, a compulsion to look at the tower. There, in the bell tower, standing amongst the ruins, was another figure. Its form was more familiar, but still twisted, more human, yet somehow wrong. The figure waved slowly, and Mia's blood ran cold as she recognized it. It was her mother. "Mom," she whispered, her voice trembling with disbelief. But her mother's eyes were wide, vacant, empty. She was not there, not really. She was just another part of whatever was consuming Black Hollow. The bell rang again, louder than before, and Mia knew in the deepest part of her soul that the town was lost. The creature was the curse, and the curse was the town itself. They were never going to escape. Mia couldn't tear her eyes away from the twisted form of her mother, standing motionless at the bell tower. The world around her seemed to warp, the edges of her vision blurring, as if the very air was being sucked into the chasm beneath the square. The distant howl of wind turned into something more sinister, a low growl that reverberated in her chest. "Mom," she cried out again, but there was no recognition in her mother's expression. Her mother's eyes, those deep, soulless voids, stared back at her, empty and cold. Liam tugged at Mia's sleeve. "We need to go, Mia. We need to get out of here now." But Mia was frozen, rooted to the spot. The bell rang again, its eerie chime filling the air. And it was then that Mia realized the truth. The bell was not just tolling, it was calling something, or someone. She wasn't sure what, but she felt it deep within her bones. The air crackled with anticipation, as if whatever had been waiting in the shadows was now coming for them. "Mia!" Liam's voice broke through her trance, snapping her back to reality. He was pulling at her harder now, his small hands trembling with fear. "Please, Mia, don't look at her. It's not her. She's gone." Mia took a step back, her heart pounding in her chest. Liam was right. This was not her mother. It couldn't be. Her mother was gone, lost to whatever curse had taken root in Black Hollow. The creature, the thing that had been lurking in the town's shadows, had twisted her into something monstrous, just like it had done to so many others. But what was it that kept calling to her? Why did she feel this insistent pull toward the bell tower, as if the very ground beneath her feet was urging her to come closer? I can't move," Mia whispered. Her body felt heavy, as though the town itself was holding her in place. The ground trembled again, more violently this time, and Mia stumbled backward. She could hear the faint rustling of something moving beneath the snow, something large, something with many limbs. Her heart sank. From the darkness, the creature appeared again, its long, spindly fingers reaching out from the shadows, dragging its form into the square. Mia could see it clearly now, its hollow eyes locked onto her. There was no escape from it. It was everywhere, in everything. Black Hollow had become its domain. Liam yanked her away, pulling her in the opposite direction toward the town's church. The door, once boarded up and sealed, stood ajar as if inviting them inside. "We have to go inside," Liam said, his voice urgent. "It's our only chance." Mia nodded, her legs shaky as she followed him. The creature was still following them, its grotesque form slithering through the snow, its movements jerky and unnatural. Every time Mia looked over her shoulder, she could see it getting closer, its long, unnerving limbs reaching out to grab them. The door to the church loomed ahead, a sanctuary from the chaos that was unfolding around them. They burst through the door, slamming it shut behind them with a force that rattled the windows. Mia's breathing was ragged as she looked around. The inside of the church was nothing like she remembered. The pews were overturned, and the stained glass windows were shattered, allowing the cold wind to whip through the empty space. But what caught her attention was the altar. The altar was bathed in a pale, flickering light, as if someone was standing there, waiting. Mia's heart skipped a beat when she saw what it was. A figure stood in front of the altar, draped in tattered robes, its face obscured by a hood. The air around it was thick with an unnatural heaviness, like a storm was gathering. Its presence was suffocating. "Who are you?" Mia whispered, her voice barely audible. The figure didn't respond, but its hand lifted slowly, pointing toward the altar. Mia hesitated for a moment, then moved toward it, her feet dragging as though the very ground was resisting her every step. Liam clung to her side, his small hand gripping hers tightly. "Mia, don't," he urged. "It's not safe." But Mia couldn't stop. The figure was drawing her in, its silent command irresistible. When Mia reached the altar, she saw something that nearly made her heart stop. There, at the center, was a large book, its pages yellowed and fragile with age. The book seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy, and as she reached out to touch it, a deep, guttural voice echoed through the church. "It's too late," the voice said, reverberating off the walls. "You should have stayed away." Mia froze, her hand hovering above the book. She turned slowly to face the figure, her heart hammering in her chest. The figure lifted its hood, revealing a face she never thought she would see again. Her father. Mia's heart stopped. Her father's face, once so familiar, was now a twisted, hollowed shell. His eyes, sunken and dark, locked onto hers with an intensity that made her stomach churn. He hadn't aged a day since the night he vanished. He looked the same as the last time she saw him, but the thing standing before her was not her father. It couldn't be. "Dad!" Mia choked out, her voice cracking. The figure didn't respond. Instead, it tilted its head, the movement slow and deliberate, as if studying her. His mouth twitched, an unnatural, empty smile forming on his lips. "You should have left," he said, his voice a rasp that echoed around the room like a whisper in the wind. "This town, it doesn't let go." Liam tugged on Mia's sleeve, his face pale with fear. "Mia, we need to get out, now!" But Mia couldn't move. She couldn't tear her gaze away from the figure that once gave her comfort and love, now corrupted into something monstrous. "Why?" Mia managed to ask, her throat tightening. "What happened? What's going on here?" Her father's smile widened, his eyes gleaming with something dark and malevolent. "You know the story, Mia. Black Hollow has always taken, and it never gives back. It is the heart of the curse, the source of everything you felt, and now you're part of it." Mia shook her head, the weight of his words pressing down on her. The pieces of the puzzle were slowly falling into place, but the truth was too much to bear. "No," she whispered, barely able to form the words. You didn't do this. You didn't bring us here." But her father's smile only grew, his figure suddenly towering over her. "I did. I didn't mean to, but I couldn't stop it. When I found this town, its whispers, they were impossible to ignore. The curse was stronger than any of us realized. And when I came back to look for you, I became part of it too." The room seemed to darken even further, the air growing thick and heavy. The walls of the church began to close in, and Mia felt as though the very foundations of the building were shaking with the power of what had been unleashed. Her father stepped closer, his form moving with unnatural speed. The air smelled of decay, and the space felt suffocating, as if the town itself was closing in around them. Liam tugged at her again. "Mia, please, we need to go." But before Mia could respond, the creature from the bell tower appeared in the doorway. Its grotesque, twisted body filled the frame, its limbs stretching unnaturally as it lurched toward them. The thing had no face, only a gaping void where one should be. "You shouldn't have come back," her father said, his voice dark and cold, like a death knell. "Now, you'll never leave. None of us will." The creature lunged forward with terrifying speed, and Mia barely had time to react before Liam grabbed her hand, pulling her toward the back of the church. They ran, stumbling over debris and broken pews as the creature's chilling, disembodied screech echoed through the halls behind them. They reached the back door, the light from outside flickering through the crack. Mia pushed the door open with all her strength, and they rushed outside, into the cold, the snow swirling around them. But the creature was still coming, its eerie screech growing louder. closer. They sprinted through the square, heading for the only place they could think of, the woods that bordered Black Hollow. Maybe there, in the trees, they could find shelter or escape. But as they neared the edge of the town, Mia glanced back and her heart sank. The creature was not alone. Figures, twisted and grotesque, moved through the streets, emerging from the shadows. The people of Black Hollow, all of them, her father, her mother, everyone, had become part of the curse, trapped in its eternal cycle of darkness and death. "They're all gone," Mia whispered, tears streaming down her face. "We can't save them." Liam turned to her, his face filled with terror. "Mia, we can't stay here. We have to keep running." But Mia wasn't sure if running would be enough. Black Hollow had consumed everything, its people, its past, its very soul. The curse was too strong, and it wasn't going to let them leave. As they fled into the snowstorm, Mia couldn't shake the feeling that they had made a terrible mistake. Black Hollow wasn't just a town. It was a force, a living, breathing entity that had drawn them in, just like it had drawn in her father, her mother, and all the others before them. And now, it had them too. The snowstorm swallowed them whole, the wind howling as they disappeared into the night, leaving Black Hollow behind, at least for now. But Mia knew deep down that the curse would always follow. It would always be there, lurking in the darkness, waiting for the next soul to be consumed. And no matter where they ran, the bells would always toll.